Alrighty, welcome back to my channel, Maybe Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we're going to be starting a new series where I talk about every 5-star book I've read. This list is based on my Goodreads, so keep in mind that I didn't start using Goodreads until about maybe 2019-ish, 2018, 2019 time frame. So I haven't logged a bunch of books that I've kind of read when I was younger. You'll see on this list that there are a couple random ones that I decided to add to the Goodreads, to my Goodreads afterwards, but I'm sure there are a lot of books that I've read kind of in the interim and in my younger years that aren't listed here. But going by what's on my Goodreads, I've read a total of 569 books, and 175 of those have been 5 stars. Now, as you all know, Goodreads does not have half stars, so some of these 5 stars are actually 4.5 rounded up for Goodreads, and I have marked which ones those are just for discussion purposes. But what really inspired this video was I filmed quite a long time ago now, probably over 2 months ago now. I did film a reacting to 1-star reviews of 5-star books, my 5-star books. I'd done that quite a long time ago and I really enjoyed doing it, so I finally did a part 2, but I never got around to editing it. So let me know if you guys still want that. I think the footage is good. It's just, you know, from a while ago now, but if you're still interested, I can still edit that and get that out. But when I was filming that video and pulled up my books that I had read based on star rating, I saw a couple books in the 5-star range where I was like, I don't know if that would still be 5 stars for me if I sat down and reflected on it. And that gave me the idea for this series. So what I'm going to do is go through the list of all the 5-star books I've put into Goodreads and see if I still think they belong there upon reflection. I think it'll be really interesting to see how my tastes have changed over the years and how I look back at previous works that I clearly loved. What's also interesting about this is when I sorted my Goodreads books by star rating, all of the other kind of typical rating organization aspects seem to go out the window. Date read, who is she? Don't know her. So the order's very odd. There might be some childhood favorites or books that I read a really long time ago and have never discussed on my channel popping up next to books that I've read recently. But I thought that kind of randomized order was quite fun, actually. And it can keep you guys on your toes a little bit. You have no idea what I'm going to be bringing up next. To keep these videos from being a feature-length film, I'm going to talk about one Goodreads page per part, and there are 30 books per page. So without further ado, let's take a look at some of my 5 stars. Do I have taste? Do I not? Let's find out. This first one is absolutely going to stay in the 5-star range, and if you don't like it, then I question your taste, let me say, and that is Howl's Moving Castle. This is the only Folio Society edition that I own. It is precious to me, and this book is definitely due for a reread as soon as possible. Taking it out of the slipcase, this is what it looks like. I had seen the Ghibli movie first, I think as almost everyone does. And then when I learned it was based on a book, I knew that I wanted to... Oh god, it's so pretty. Look at those end papers, oh my god. I know I won't shut up about it, but meeting Marie Alice Harrell at Worldcon in Glasgow, just looking at this book reminds me of why I won't shut up about that fact. It's so whimsical and beautiful. It's got chapter headings that fit the vibe of the story so well. Okay, this was not supposed to be me talking about this edition of this book, but I just can't help but take a minute to enjoy it whenever I have it in my hands. So this book is definitely due for a reread from this particular edition because I originally read it. How did I read it? I think it was ebook, maybe. I think I got it from my library. Is that what it was? I don't quite remember, but I haven't read from this edition yet. 5 stars. I adore this story. It's one of the only examples where I think the original material and the adaptation are on equal footing, because the Ghibli adaptation took a lot of the core points of this story and added their own kind of whimsical Ghibli specific touch to it, whereas this story has its own charm and beauty to it. I can't wait to reread this, but this is definitely 5 stars. I adore it. The next book is Funny in Farsi, a memoir of growing up Iranian in America. This is a book I haven't talked about for ages. I read this, when did I read this? Back in 2020. It feels like longer. But this book had me laughing out loud, even like crying laughing at multiple points. One of the quotes from my review is, "Dumas's dry humor is top-notch, and the warmth radiating from her family made me want nothing more than to go meet them all and talk over some delicious Persian food." And this is the experience that I remember from this book. It's educational in explaining how discrimination increased, especially at the time of 9/11, which is when she was in the States, when Dumas, the author, was in the States. But it's not preachy in its delivery style. It makes you feel very welcome within the pages and makes you feel like she's happy to have you there. The author's happy to have you. But it also is educational at the same time. So I thought that the balance there was beautifully struck. I believe that this book also has a sequel. Let me see. That I intended to read. Yes, it does. It's called Laughing Without an Accent. So this is another one that I would really be interested in reading and continuing. I don't think I mentioned that, actually. I haven't continued the Howl's Moving Castle series. So this would be another one, Funny and Farsi, where I would like to continue. Let me just add to my open series list, why don't I? This next one is so incredibly random. Like, I have no idea why I chose to add this specific book to my Goodreads. This must have been when I had just recently opened a Goodreads account and I was just trying to throw everything on there that I could think of that I'd read. And one of them, which I happen to have physically because I now have a daughter, is Green Eggs and Ham. I gave this 5 stars, apparently. I mean, I guess, previous Taylor, it could be 5-star material. I loved it when I was a kid. The rhymes are pretty, you know, they're pretty on point. Not in a box, not with a fox. Not in a house, not with a mouse. I would not eat them here or there. I would not eat them anywhere. I would not like green eggs and ham. I would not eat green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam. I am. I mean, that, you know, 5-star material, possibly. I kind of just enjoy the fact that this was the 3rd book listed as my 5-star book, so I think I'm just going to keep it that way. But yeah, green eggs and ham, I suppose. He's staying. In a completely different direction, I have Night, the Night trilogy, the first one in the Night trilogy by Elie Wiesel. This is, my review of this simply says, this book is devastating but oh so necessary. And this is an account of surviving a concentration camp during the Holocaust. And the Night trilogy, there's three books. That's what a trilogy is. Good Lord. I think my caffeine is running out for today. The first is called Night, and I believe it's Dawn and then Day. So I would like to read the 2nd and 3rd installment, again, continuing on with adding to my series list. But I would like to read those because I feel like the trilogy is designed to end on a happier or more hopeful note. But the first book, Night, is... oh, it is so hard to read. Wiesel does not shy away from showing us just the horrors, the absolute horrors that he experienced. And knowing that this is a truth and a reality has made some of those scenes like stick in my head to this day. It's so dark, but like I said, so necessary. So this is definitely staying in the 5-star range. Next is The Book Thief. Now, I barely remember this book. But apparently I really enjoyed it. Like, my review says, usually I fly through my 5-star reads, but this one took me a while, possibly because every line is poetry that I didn't want to miss. I don't recall that experience. Like, I'm not calling previous me a liar. I read this back in 2018, so it has been a hot minute since these words have entered my eyeballs. But it hasn't stuck with me. So I don't know if that can maintain its 5-star status if I don't really remember it or why it ended up being 5 stars in the first place. I don't really know. The whole point of this was to reflect on these 5 stars and maybe cull the list a little bit. This one's gonna have to go in the maybe pile, and I think I'll revisit it later because clearly I thoroughly enjoyed it. I said in my review as well that I had my first actual book cry in a long time. So it did touch me, but it didn't stay with me in the way that other books that have touched me in that way have stayed with me over the years. So I'm not really sure. Let me know in the comments down below what your experience with this book has been. Has it stuck with you, or are you kind of like me where you don't remember details? I don't know, I'll have to come back to that one. Next, I have another Dr. Seuss book, which I just so happen to have, and that's The Lorax. This one though, I think deserves like its 5 stars because that unless quote, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. That is a banger of a line, and I think this book serves a really important purpose in teaching children about the effect you can have on the environment in a positive way. You know, if you show care to what's around you, that care will manifest itself, right? So not just in the negative aspect of your actions have consequences, but in the positive way that you can affect change if you choose to do so. I think this deserves its 5-star status. So like proudly, The Lorax, she's hanging around. Next, again, the order is so random here. I don't know what Goodreads was doing, but we have The Last Argument of Kings, which is the 3rd book in the First Law trilogy. This is in the 5-star list because it was a 4.5 and there's no half stars. This series, in the beginning, I wasn't sure about it. So the first book you will not find in this 5-star list because I've talked about this before, but there's one particular perspective in that first book, Jezal, that I did not care about. So that was a third of the book that I was not interested in. But then the second book came around and completely changed my mind. The character work that was done in the first book was so beautifully used and built upon in the second and the third installment that I get what people are talking about now. And the audiobooks are also incredible, so that adds a whole new perspective to this series. The reason this is a 4.5 and I stand by that and not a 5 is some of the reveals at the end felt a little too mustache twirly puppet master vibes for me, where a lot of the plot twists or guilt or what's the word I'm looking for, explanation fell at the feet of one particular character, and I was like, that seems a little convenient that this one particular character, you know, is the mastermind. I don't know. There was just something about that, the way that those things were wrapped up, that did not work so well for me. My interest in the magic aspect of this also really started to dwindle towards the end. I just felt like we skimmed the surface consistently of this magic, but it was supposed to play this like larger role in the world, but I didn't feel like we ever dived deep enough for me to really care or have a grasp on it. So with those two aspects, it couldn't be a full 5 stars, but the character work and the intricate plotting is so incredibly well done that like this had to be above a 4. Therefore, we're at the 4.5. I'm going to be reading Best Served Cold before the end of the year, and I've heard that some of Abercrombie's best work to date, so I am very excited to get to that. But this one is going to stay on the 5-star list because of the rating system. I don't think it should be a 4, so it's not dropping down, but it is technically a 4.5. Next, we have Stargirl. Who remembers Stargirl? I remember my feeling of reading this book. I don't remember the book itself so well, except for the main kind of plot beats and themes. But what I do remember about it is it's about this girl who is different and unapologetically different. And we follow our main character as they interact with this girl known as Stargirl. And I remember feeling seen and understood, and also that it gave me empathy for other people who might seem a bit more different than I was, right? So I think I'm gonna keep this as a 5-star book because I read this, good Lord, when did I read this? At least in middle school, might have been elementary school. And I still remember the themes and the way that it made me feel, and the fact that it made me feel more empathetic, and I think that in and of itself deserves a 5-star. So yeah, she's staying. Next I have The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. This is an interesting one for me because I read tons of books for my Victorian literature classes in university. That wasn't my major or anything. I just really enjoyed those classes, and that professor particularly was so damn good at his job. I enjoyed, oh gosh, he reignited my love for reading. I hope he's doing well wherever he is. So I took on a bunch of extra reading, even though it wasn't part of my major, and I read a whole bunch of books. But The Moonstone is the one that sticks out to me, where it didn't feel like a chore that I was reading it. It could also be that it was later in the curriculum, so I was much more used to the writing style, the jargon, the themes that are present in a lot of Victorian works, so I could engage with it on a deeper level. That could also be an aspect of why I loved it so much. But what I remember about it is the very intelligent and well-integrated thoughts on colonialism that were included in here. And it was also a fascinating murder mystery. Not murder mystery, mystery in general. If I'm recalling correctly, the Moonstone is a gem that was taken from India, somewhere overseas, and brought back to England. And this family that has this Moonstone is like bragging about it. And it ends up getting stolen, and the mystery is trying to figure out who stole it. And then, of course, the plot thickens from there, and all these other plot threads end up coming in. And I remember not being able to figure out the answer and being really invested in all of the twists and turns involved in the story. This is another one that I would really like to reread, but I'm comfortable keeping it at a 5-star rating because I remember enough about what I enjoyed about it and my experience. But clearly, I don't remember the finer details. So I think this is one that could go for a reread eventually. Going back to my childhood a bit is Searching for Dragons. This is the second book in the Enchanted Forest Chronicles. Oh, and actually just below that is the first one, Dealing with Dragons. So this series is one that I have reread as an adult because I don't remember what inspired this. I think I was doing a challenge on my channel at some point where I was rereading childhood favorites. I think I did that for a little while. Am I making up my own channel history? I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Anyway, I became interested in rereading these books because I read them so much as a child. I got them out of the library repeatedly, over and over and over again. And I remembered that I didn't enjoy some of them, and some of them I loved from the bottom of my heart. And upon reread, that was also true. The first two are 5 Glowing Stars. I love them. We follow our main character, who's a princess, who does not want to do her princess duties. So what does she do? What's her solution to this? She runs away and voluntarily asks to be kidnapped by a dragon. And she ends up living with the dragons. And the whole point is that it takes a lot of the fairy tale tropes and twists them on their head. And it's so, the dry, witty humor and the dragon characters, the way they react to her is so funny. 'Cause she's like, hey, can you kidnap me? And they're like, I don't need a princess. What are you gonna do for me? Like, why would I kidnap you? And just the idea of like, the dragons are doing her a favor by kidnapping her. That kind of dry humor and the twist on the themes is consistent throughout the first 2 parts of this series, the first 2 books, and I adored it. The third book, we don't talk about the third book, okay? That 1.52 stars was not good. The tropes were taken way too far. It was so predictable. There was this one character that is insufferable. Ugh. Yeah, no, the third book is not good. And then the fourth book kind of recovers, and I believe it finished at around a 4 stars for me. But the first 2 books, they deserve their 5 stars, and I can see myself rereading these every once in a while throughout my life. Next, we have The Handmaid's Tale. This is another one that I could do a reread, could use a reread at some point in my life, but I remember this one a lot more vividly than some others that we've talked about thus far. I wrote in my review, this book made me experience such raw emotions that haven't been evoked in a long time. I felt devastated, frustrated, hopeful, angry, horrified, and joyous, right along with Offred, the main character. So yeah, I remember those feelings, and I do recall the plot of this. And I think one of the things that makes this book so impactful is how it still rings true today, and how its warnings are something we should still heed. In a place that's almost a little bit too close to home with the way that things are going in the political landscape right now. I'm not going to dive too deeply into that because I feel like that's a completely different discussion in and of itself, but I do think that this book deserves to be on the 5-star list here. 1, for the emotions that it gave me, and 2, the conversations that it sparks and continues to facilitate. On the subject of continuing series as well, I was originally going to read The Testaments, but then as time has passed, I've seen reviews, it's not something I'm interested in, so I'm not going to continue. I'm going to treat The Handmaid's Tale as a standalone and just leave it at that. Next, we have Winnie the Pooh! This is one that I read this year, so I've talked about it quite a bit recently, so I won't go on about this book for too long. But if you've been around my channel, you know that this is now an all-time favorite of mine. It was a Patreon pick, the first Patreon pick, actually, where they got to, my patrons got to choose the book that I was reading for the month. I adore it. It has now become the book that I'm trying to collect when I go on travels. I'm trying to get a copy of this and amass a small little collection of it. This is my Japanese anniversary edition. Gorgeous. I have one from Edinburgh when I went to Worldcon, and then I've got a couple that I've just kind of collected from eBay and things like that since I fell in love with it. Next is Warbreaker by Brando Sando. Some of these Cosmere books, when I reflect on them, are going to be interesting. This was one of the first Cosmere books I read. I think I read this after I finished the first trilogy, the first Mistborn trilogy. So I didn't have an awareness of the rest of the Cosmere at the time. And I think that this is definitely due for a reread. I definitely want to read my beautiful leatherbound edition, which I have in the States when I do reread it. Actually, looking at my review, I say at the end, I ordered Mistborn and Oathbringer finally. Can't wait until they come. So I hadn't read Mistborn yet. I started the Cosmere with The Way of Kings. And then I read Words of Radiance, and Oathbringer wasn't out yet, maybe? And then I ended up reading this book. I think that was the order that I went in. So I do think that reading this with the knowledge that I have now could give it a different perspective. But what I mostly remember from this book is Lightsong, and he carried this book on his back. Every time he was on the page, that's what gave me the most joy. So I would be interested rereading this and seeing if the things that hit as hard the second time around, or if it's just Lightsong making this book incredible. Whether it would go down to a 4 or 4.5 or remain at its 5-star rating, I would be very interested in that. So the Cosmere is going to be a series that, or a world that I'm going to be rereading stories in for a really long time, for probably my whole life. So there's no rush to reread this, but I think it's something that I definitely want to do in the future. The next book is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. I had this beat up discolored paperback edition that I remember reading. Maya Angelou is just, her way with words, I feel like the woman would breathe and it would sound like poetry. It's just so beautifully written, everything that she's ever done. I spoke earlier about how one of my main memories of Stargirl is that it instilled this feeling of empathy within me. This is one of those books that's going to do that for you. Not only empathy for someone who looks different from you, therefore their struggle is different, but also empathy for those who may look like you, that are going through a similar struggle that maybe you didn't have the capacity to show empathy for them in that moment because you were also going through something. Just the unflinching way that this book looks at life and struggle and the beauty that can be found in those moments. It's really, really good. It's 5 stars. It's staying there for sure. Next one is also solidly staying in the 5-star range, and that is The Hobbit. I have this adorable little pocket 75th anniversary edition that I received from a friend a couple of years ago, and I've always had it on my shelf ever since. It's an adorable romp of a book that is the beginning of the huge epic that is The Lord of the Rings. I have a tattoo of Minas Tirith on my arm, so I think it's pretty obvious that I enjoy that story. And The Hobbit is just such a nice little cozy adventure book that is adventure for the sake of adventure. It doesn't have to have all these larger themes going through it. Sometimes there's just trolls that turn to stone and it is what it is, you know? And I love this book for that. Next on my list is Memoirs of a Geisha. This one I remember specifically. I was reading this at a break time during my job when I used to work at a speech pathology office. And I was reading a scene that was in the courtyard, or the garden space of one of the main geisha houses. And it was a dark atmosphere, and she was cleaning something. I don't remember the exact scene, but I remember where I was when I read it and the indescribable feeling I had reading it, the mixture of beauty and sadness and sense of place just seeped into me in that moment. And that's what I remember the most from the book. This one I'd be a little concerned to reread as to whether it would hold up for me, because obviously, having lived in Japan now for about 9 years, I know a lot more about the intricacies of Japanese culture, and I find that I'm pickier about the way that they're represented in books. Not that I know the ins and outs of the life of a geisha. That is a whole different world that I still know next to nothing about the inner workings of. But I think I would just be a little concerned rereading this just to know how I would feel about it. That would be an interesting project, though. But I don't really have a reason to knock this down from 5 stars, because what I do remember of my experience reading it was that sense of place, and it stuck with me for so long. I don't know if that warrants 4 or 5 stars though, because do I remember other aspects of it? Kind of. But I think that's also mixing with the movie. I think I'm kind of converging the two worlds there a little bit. So I'm not really sure. This one might not merit a 5 star. That's gonna go in the maybe pile. Again, let me know in the comments down below what you think. Next, we have 2 5 stars that are just all vibes, and I will not be taking any questions today. And that is Happy Hustle High, volumes 1 and 2. This manga is trash. It is ass, and I know it, but I love it. We follow the main character who is a tomboy, a very stereotypical tomboy. And of course, it's a shoujo love manga, so she ends up getting involved with the guy at the school who is not interested at all. English, please. Oh my God. He's not interested in girls at all. That's what I was trying to say. And of course, shenanigans ensue. And I've reread this, the first 2 or 3 volumes, a couple times now in my life, because I love the comedic dynamic between the two opposing personalities of the 2 main characters. It's so well done. It's a romp. It's nothing serious, but I love it. So 5 stars. Don't finish the series though. It goes downhill fast and it is just not good. But the beginning is good and really fun. Then we have I, Robot. This one I'm definitely keeping in the 5 star range. I consumed this via audiobook, but I enjoyed it so much that I ended up getting it physically. But this one's close enough to me that I remember the details of it, and I wrote in my review specifically the themes that I enjoyed, which are questions like, can one become too attached to a robot over humans? What would happen when a robot faces a moral dilemma that goes against its core programming? Are robots able to replace humans in all work capacities, or are there some only doable by humans? I continue to say all of these situations are explored, but through a thoroughly human lens that keeps your attention and makes you feel invested in the answers. So this is definitely staying at 5 stars, and one day it would be nice to do a reread. Definitely want to continue with other works of Asimov though. Next, Before They Are Hanged. So this is the second book in the First Law trilogy. I told you the first book would not be on this 5 star list, and I already explained why. The second book is a 4.5, not a 5. But I could see this inching up to a 5 actually upon reflection, just because of how much I enjoyed the character building done here that was building off of the first book. But it's still sitting at a 4.5, not quite a 5, but I already explained that, so that's this one. Now this next one is the main reason when I was filming that previous video of reacting to 1 star reviews of my favorites. When I saw this book is the one that inspired me to check out my dubious 5 star ratings, and that was The Well of Ascension. Look, listen, I'm going to be controversial here in the general scope of the fantasy world, but not controversial on my channel because I'm loud about it, but I support Mistborn Era 1 slander on this channel, okay? I don't think it's his best work. Is the magic system incredible? Yes. Are the Sanderlanches amazing? Yes. And I think that Sanderlanche is what made me give this book 5 stars, because my memory of this book was like bashing my head against a wall for a period of time. Also, the attempt at a love triangle in this book, I'm not going to name names or talk about no one, not giving nothing away, but god awful. Like, it was a waste of page space, okay? The character who's obviously going to lose in this love triangle, I don't know what his point was in this story. No. So the fact that this is 5 stars has me questioning my past self. Like, was I on such a high from the Sanderlanche with all the plot points coming together that I forgot my experience at the beginning of this book? I don't know. I haven't reread Mistborn, so I can't really speak for my past self, but I think this one's gonna have to drop down based on my memory of it, my reflections back on how I felt when I was reading it. Yeah, now this has got to drop down to like a 3. I don't know why it was in the 5-star range, so this one's got to go. Next, we've got 3 Harry Potter books. Again, the order's weird. These are going to pop up at random times, but I have Prisoner of Azkaban, Deathly Hallows, and Goblet of Fire are the ones that popped up here. They're all 5 stars. I am part of the Harry Potter generation. My dad read them to me before I could read by myself, and that started a tradition of both of us sitting down to read the books together. Right upon release, we would wait for the books together outside of, the bookshops at the midnight releases. There's just so much comfort and joy and love infused into this series for me that they're just going to remain 5 stars. They just are. Next, another Brando Sando, Elantris. This one's going to stay 5 stars, okay. I do want to reread this because this is one of the first works that I read from him, so I didn't have the context that I have now, but I remember viscerally how much I enjoyed every aspect of this book. The political machinations, the religion as a power structure themes in here, which I always eat up in my stories. And the other thing that I remember loving about this book was that the main character was just a good person. Like, he's not morally gray, and it was kind of refreshing to have that. He's genuinely a positive force in the world around him. And that was genuinely enjoyable to read in an adult fantasy setting, because I feel like we don't get that so often. And not that he's not flawed, he's not perfect, but the positive motivations that he had were so refreshing, and he's just a cinnamon bun, and I love him. I enjoyed that immensely, I remember. And through him, the exploration of the human condition just, it hit somewhere for me. It hit me. This one is definitely staying on the 5-star list. We've got 3 more to talk about for this Goodreads page. The next one is Pride and Prejudice. This I actually had at a 4.5, which confuses me because current Taylor, my memory of Pride and Prejudice was that I absolutely adored every single second of that story. So I don't know why this is at a 4.5 and not a 5. So I think this is going to be the opposite, where I'm going to bump this up rather than knock it down and make it a 5-star. Okay, this is driving me crazy because I want to check my review, because I specifically saw that I mentioned why it wasn't 5 stars, but now my Goodreads has like crashed for no reason. So just another reason that Goodreads is absolute ass. I know, I need to switch over to, what's it called, Stories something, the other platform, but it's just like shifting all the books over. I haven't made the time for it. But here's Goodreads crashing on me and wasting my time anyway, so. Well, my review is not loading, but apparently there was a reason that it wasn't 5 stars. I saw the beginning of my sentence there, but I don't remember what that reason was. So clearly it wasn't that significant. So I think this one's going to get bumped up because I adored Pride and Prejudice. Next, we have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This is another one that is in recent years, so I remember a lot of the details of it. I loved the gothic feeling of this story. There were a couple little dad jokes thrown in where I was like, okay, like I love the contrast here. I can see why those little silly like punny dad jokes would have pulled people out of the atmosphere and out of the story, and why it wouldn't have worked for some people. But for me, the contrast, like laughing out loud in the middle of this dark gothic story, I know I really enjoyed that. So this one is 5 stars for me, and it's sticking around. And the last one is The Fellowship of the Ring. This one actually stands out in my head as my favorite of the trilogy because it has that cozy world setup that I just love sinking into. Like tavern scenes, give them to me. Market scenes, oh, I will go through a market with my characters all day. So Fellowship is the book that really lets us sit in those kinds of cozy environmental scenes. And yeah, I just remember adoring that immensely. So this one's definitely 5 stars. I already said I got a tattoo of it, so you know, that's not a surprise. Those are the first 30 books on my 5-star list. Let me know in the comments down below if any of those surprised you, what your thoughts on them are. If you have any predictions for what other books might come up in the later parts, I would be really interested to hear. So the results of this first part is that The Well of Ascension is going to be dropping off of the 5-star list, and Memoirs of a Geisha and The Book Thief have been put in a maybe pile for me to contemplate at a later date. You can look forward to the next parts of this coming out soon, and at the end I plan to do kind of a summary video of how the list has changed, what's moved around, and some reflections on how my taste has changed over time. So look forward to all of those coming out soon. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell. I'd love to have you as part of this community, and I appreciate it. But for now, I'm gonna head out. Jane!